In the dusty haze of a relentless Wyoming sunset, where the sky bled orange like a fresh wound across the prairie, Elias Thorne stood with his weathered Colt revolver pressed against the temple of a trembling stranger. The man's eyes, wide with the raw terror of a cornered animal, locked onto Elias's unyielding gaze. "I beg you, just make it quick," the stranger whispered, his voice cracking like dry timber underfoot, a plea that hung heavy in the air thick with the scent of sagebrush and impending doom. Elias's finger hovered on the trigger, the weight of a lifetime's hardships etched into his calloused hands, freezing him in that eternal moment between mercy and vengeance. The wind howled through the canyons like a mournful ghost, carrying echoes of forgotten sins, as the rancher's heart pounded with the thunder of decisions that could shatter souls. If you believe in the power of kindness and the beauty of second chances, hit that like button, drop a comment below sharing your thoughts, share this story with someone who needs it, and subscribe to Moments of Love for more tales that touch the heart and remind us of our shared humanity. Elias Thorne had not always been a man carved from stone and solitude. Born under the vast, unforgiving skies of the Wild West in the late 1800s, he grew up on a modest ranch handed down from his father, a place where the land promised abundance but delivered trials. As a young boy, he learned to rope calves before he could read, his small hands blistering under the sun as he dreamed of building a legacy that would outlast the eroded buttes surrounding their homestead. Life was a rhythm of dawn to dusk labor, interrupted only by the occasional joy of family gatherings around a flickering lantern, where his mother would sing old hymns that softened the edges of their harsh existence. But the West was a thief in disguise, stealing away the innocent with the swiftness of a prairie fire. When Elias was just 19, a band of ruthless outlaws raided their ranch under the cover of a moonless night, driven by greed for the few cattle they possessed. Gunfire shattered the peace, and by morning, Elias awoke to the acrid smell of smoke and blood, his parents lifeless on the porch, their dreams scattered like ashes in the wind. From that day forward, a shadow cloaked his spirit, turning the once hopeful youth into a guardian of his own isolation, vowing to protect what little remained with an iron will that brooked no trespassers. Years blurred into decades on the Thorne Ranch, where Elias toiled alone, his only companions the lowing cattle and the whispering winds that carried secrets from distant horizons. The land, once fertile, had turned treacherous under the grip of a merciless drought that began in the summer of 1887 and lingered like a curse. Rivers dwindled to trickles, grass withered to brittle stalks, and Elias watched helplessly as his herd thinned, each starving animal a reminder of his fragility in the face of nature's indifference. He mended fences with wire that cut into his palms, dug wells that yielded only dust, and bartered in town for scraps of feed, his face growing lined with the furrows of endless worry. Loneliness gnawed at him deeper than hunger, for in the quiet evenings by the fire, memories of his lost family haunted him, his mother's gentle laugh, his father's steady guidance, leaving him to question if survival was worth the hollow ache in his chest. Whispers in the saloons spoke of Elias as a ghost of a man, unbreakable yet broken, a rancher who had forgotten how to trust, let alone forgive. Yet beneath that hardened exterior simmered a flicker of the boy who once believed in redemption, buried under layers of grief and guarded by the revolver always at his hip. The stranger appeared one fateful twilight, a silhouette against the fading light, slipping through the barbed wire like a shadow with desperate intent. Elias, patrolling his parched acres on his faithful mare, spotted the intruder attempting to lead away one of his last healthy steers, the animal's ribs protruding like accusations against the famine. Rage surged through Elias like a flash flood, propelling him from the saddle with the agility of a man half his age. He tackled the thief to the ground, dust billowing around them in a chaotic storm, and pinned him with the cold barrel of his gun. The man was young, barely past 20, his clothes ragged and face gaunt from what Elias would later learn was a journey of starvation across the Badlands. His name was Jacob Hale, a drifter orphaned by the same brutal West that had claimed Elias's kin, driven to theft not by malice but by the gnawing desperation to save his ailing sister back in a forgotten mining town. As Jacob begged for a swift end, his words pierced Elias like a knife, evoking the phantom pain of his own losses, the pleas he imagined his parents might have uttered in their final moments. Time seemed to stretch, the rancher's finger frozen on the trigger, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting storms. The code of the frontier demanded justice, swift and final, yet something in Jacob's eyes mirrored the vulnerability Elias had long suppressed. In that suspended instant, Elias's resolve cracked like parched earth under rain. The unthinkable stirred within him, not the pull of the trigger, but a hesitation born of buried empathy. He lowered the gun, his hand trembling for the first time in years, and instead of delivering death, he extended a calloused palm to help Jacob to his feet. The young man's bewilderment mirrored Elias's own shock, as if the rancher had defied not just the intruder but the very laws of the Wild West that preached an eye for an eye. Words tumbled out haltingly from Elias, explanations of his own scars, the raids that had orphaned him too, forging an unexpected bridge across the chasm of suspicion. Jacob, expecting oblivion, found instead a reluctant ally, as Elias invited him into the dim light of his cabin, sharing a meager meal of beans and hardtack by the hearth. The conversation stretched into the night, revelations unfolding like pages from a tattered diary, Jacob's sister wasting away from fever, his futile searches for work in ghost towns, the moral erosion that led him to this desperate act. Elias listened, the walls around his heart crumbling stone by stone, realizing that vengeance would only perpetuate the cycle of loss that had defined his life. As days turned to weeks, an uneasy alliance formed on the Thorn Ranch, a testament to the fragile sprout of trust amid barren soil. Jacob proved his worth, his youthful strength aiding Elias in reinforcing the fences against coyotes and scavenging the last viable water sources. Together, they faced the drought's wrath, rigging makeshift irrigation from a distant creek, their sweat mingling with the earth in a shared battle for survival. Elias taught Jacob the rhythms of ranch life, the art of reading the sky for rain, the patience required to nurse a sickly calf back to health, while Jacob's stories of distant lands rekindled a spark of wonder in the older man's eyes. Challenges mounted relentlessly, a sudden storm that flooded their efforts, rustlers circling like vultures, and Elias's own internal demons whispering doubts about betrayal. There were nights when Elias gripped his revolver in the dark, second-guessing his mercy, the weight of isolation threatening to reclaim him. Jacob, too, struggled with guilt, his theft a shadow that lingered, compounded by letters from his sister pleading for aid. Yet, in these trials, bonds deepened. Elias found himself mentoring Jacob not just in survival but in resilience, sharing tales of his parents that he had locked away for decades, allowing grief to transform into a quiet strength. Change crept in like the first green shoots after a long winter, subtle yet profound. The drought began to ease with sporadic rains, as if the land itself responded to the mending of broken spirits. Elias watched Jacob grow from a frightened thief into a capable partner, his laughter echoing across the pastures in ways that filled the ranch with life once more. In turn, Jacob's gratitude manifested in small acts, a repaired roof, a shared burden during calving season, reminding Elias that humanity thrived not in solitude but in connection. One crisp morning, as they rode the fence line together, Elias confessed the depth of his transformation. The plea that had frozen him was not just Jacob's but an echo of his own unspoken cries for release from pain. The unthinkable act of mercy had saved them both, turning a moment of potential tragedy into a foundation for renewal. Word spread through the valleys of this unlikely redemption, drawing wary neighbors to the ranch, fostering a community where once there was only distrust. Elias, no longer a solitary sentinel, discovered purpose in guiding the lost, his legacy shifting from one of loss to one of quiet heroism. As the sun set on a revitalized Thorn Ranch, with cattle grazing on rejuvenated grasslands and Jacob preparing to fetch his sister to join them, Elias stood on the porch, the weight of his revolver now a relic of a forsaken path. The Wild West, with its vast expanses and unforgiving trials, had taught him that true strength lay not in swift justice but in the courage to extend a hand across the divide. Jacob's plea, once a harbinger of death, had become the catalyst for lives intertwined, proving that even in the harshest frontiers, kindness could bloom like wildflowers after rain. The rancher who had frozen in that pivotal moment emerged not as a breaker of souls, but as their mender, inspiring all who heard the tale to seek the unthinkable mercy within themselves. If this story has touched your heart and stirred emotions deep within, please like, comment, and subscribe to Moments of Love. Let us know in the comments below by sharing the line, "Kindness redeems us all," if you felt the power of second chances. Your engagement keeps these heartfelt stories alive. Walls of her isolated cabin like the talons of some vengeful specter, widow Eliza Kane knelt beside the frostbitten form of her dying husband, his breath a ragged whisper against the gale's relentless roar. "The children, promise me," he gasped, his eyes dimming like embers in a dying fire, clutching her hand with the last of his rancher's strength before the cold claimed him forever, leaving her alone with 3 small souls and a legacy crumbling under the weight of winter's merciless siege. The wind screamed through the cracks, carrying away his final words like stolen prayers, as Eliza's tears froze on her cheeks, her heart fracturing into shards that mirrored the ice-encrusted world outside, where survival hung by the thinnest thread of a mother's unyielding will. If you believe in the quiet heroism of those who endure the unimaginable and the unbreakable bonds that light the darkest nights, hit that like button, drop a comment below sharing your own story of resilience, share this tale with someone facing their storm, and subscribe to Moments of Love for more stories that celebrate the human spirit's defiant glow. Eliza Kane had come to the untamed fringes of Montana Territory as a bride of 19, her heart full of the tender illusions spun in the lace-curtained parlors of the East, only to find a reality forged in the crucible of frontier hardship. Married to Thomas, a broad-shouldered homesteader with dreams as vast as the endless plains, she traded silk gowns for woolen shawls stained with lanolin and mud, her days a tapestry woven from the threads of relentless toil, tending the garden that clawed its way from rocky soil, churning butter by lamplight while lullabies escaped her lips to soothe the cries of their growing brood. Their cabin, a sturdy log sanctuary rising from the wilderness, stood as a beacon of their shared defiance against the land's indifference, where laughter rang out during harvest feasts and Thomas's calloused hands traced stories of love across her skin in the hush of starlit nights. But the West harbored no lasting mercies, it was a realm of swift betrayals, where blizzards could bury hopes as easily as they blanketed the earth in white oblivion. In the brutal winter of 1873, when the snows came early and fierce, trapping them in isolation, Thomas ventured out to check the snares for game that might stave off their hunger, only to return, or rather, to be dragged back by neighbors on snowshoes, his body a frozen monument to the storm's cruelty, his promise to protect them echoing unanswered in the void he left behind. Grief descended upon Eliza like the very blizzard that had stolen him, a suffocating shroud that blurred the edges of her world into a monochrome of despair. With Thomas gone, the ranch became a battlefield of her solitary war, chopping wood with an axe that splintered her resolve more than the timber, rationing the dwindling stores of cornmeal and salted venison while her children's wide eyes mirrored her unspoken fears. The eldest, little Miriam of 7 summers, took to whispering comforts to her siblings, her small voice a fragile anchor in the nights when the wind's wail mimicked the ghosts of what was lost. Young Caleb, barely 4, clung to Eliza's skirts with questions she could scarcely answer, his innocence a dagger to her soul, and the baby, sweet Lila, nursed at a breast that yielded less each day, her cries a symphony of the famine gnawing at their bones. Isolation amplified every trial, the nearest town a perilous 3-day trek through drifts that swallowed men whole, supplies undeliverable until spring's thaw, and wolves prowling the perimeter with eyes like glowing coals, drawn by the scent of vulnerability. Eliza's body ached from the cold that seeped into her marrow, her mind a tempest of doubt. Had she the metal to shield them, or would the frontier claim them all as its indifferent tithe? In the dim glow of the hearth, she traced Thomas's frozen features in memory, bargaining with the shadows for strength, her widow's weeds not of black crape but of frost-rimmed resolve, vowing that no storm would extinguish the light she carried for her little ones. Weeks bled into an eternity of endurance, each dawn a reluctant mercy that revealed fresh drifts barricading the door, each dusk a descent into the chill that clawed at their vitality. Eliza's ingenuity became her fiercest weapon, fashioning snowshoes from barrel staves and sinew, melting ice over the fire for water that tasted of desperation, and weaving tales of summer meadows to paint warmth into the children's paling cheeks. Yet the challenges mounted like gathering thunder. Fever gripped Caleb in its feverish talons, born of the damp chill and meager sustenance, his tiny frame racked with shivers that no blanket of pelts could quell. Provisions vanished faster than hope, forcing her to venture into the white void for pinecones and bark to chew, her steps a gamble against the abyss. Nights brought the cruelest specters, dreams of Thomas calling from the beyond, urging her onward, only to awaken to the baby's weakening wails and the realization that salvation lay not in miracles but in the raw grit of a woman remade by loss. Whispers of surrender tempted her, the seductive ease of laying down her burdens amid the drifts, but the weight of those trusting gazes anchored her, transforming terror into a forge where her spirit was tempered anew. In stolen moments of quiet, as she rocked Lila by the fire's dying embers, Eliza unearthed a wellspring of ferocity she never knew dwelled within, a mother's love, fierce as the gales, unyielding as the mountains that cradled their valley. The turning point arrived not with fanfare but with the subtle shift of fate's capricious hand, a crack in the winter's armor that widened into possibility. On a day when the sky hung low and leaden, threatening another onslaught, a lone rider emerged from the haze, a grizzled trapper named Harlan, weathered by decades of solitude, who had heard tales of the widow's plight from passing freighters and felt compelled by some long-buried echo of his own orphaned youth to brave the passes. He arrived not as savior but as partner in the fray, his sled laden with jerked meat and dried berries, his knowledge of the wilds a balm to Eliza's frayed edges. Together, they battled the fever with herbal poultices brewed from foraged roots, fortified the cabin against the wind's siege, and shared vigils where stories flowed like rare wine, Harlan's of lost comrades and reclaimed dawns, Eliza's of Thomas's gentle dreams, bridging the chasm of their isolations. Suspense laced their fragile alliance. Another blizzard loomed, wolves tested their perimeter with bolder forays, and Harlan's own wounds from a recent bear mauling threatened to sideline him, yet in this crucible, trust blossomed, tentative as the first crocus-piercing snow. Eliza, once bowed by widowhood's yoke, stood taller, her hands steadier as she learned to set traps and read the clouds' portents, her heart mending thread by thread through acts of mutual grace. The children, sensing the shift, began to play again, their laughter a defiant melody against the storm's dirge, as Caleb's fever broke under the care that now enveloped them like a communal hearth. Spring's herald arrived with the tentative drip of melting icicles and the swelling chorus of returning birds, unveiling a land reborn from winter's grasp, rivers swelling with the thaw's promise and meadows unfurling in verdant waves. The ranch, once a sepulchre of sorrow, pulsed with renewal. Harlan stayed on his kin in all but blood, his traps yielding bounty that filled their larder, while Eliza's garden burst forth under her nurtured touch, tubers and greens a testament to perseverance's quiet alchemy. Miriam took to Harlan's knee for tales of the wild, her curiosity a spark reignited. Caleb chased butterflies with the abandon of reclaimed joy, and Lila, plump-cheeked and gurgling, symbolized the fragile miracle of survival. Eliza, gazing from the porch as the sun gilded the horizon, felt the widow's shadow recede, replaced by a woman woven from scars and stars, a guardian whose trials had not diminished her but distilled her essence into something luminous. Thomas's last whisper, once a chain of grief, evolved into her guiding north, a reminder that promises kept in the face of oblivion wove the strongest legacies. The frontier, with its tempests and triumphs, whispered back that from the depths of loss, one could rise not merely intact, but whole, inspiring all who crossed her path to honor their own unspoken vows with the same unbowed grace. As the warm winds carried the scent of blooming sage across the revitalized homestead, Eliza gathered her children close, Harlan's steady presence a silent vow beside them, and in that embrace, she knew the storm had forged not endings, but eternal beginnings. The widow who had knelt in desperation emerged as a pillar of the plains, her story a beacon for wanderers and settlers alike, proving that even in the heart of winter's roar, a single promise could summon the sun. If this story has stirred the depths of your soul and reminded you of the fierce beauty in enduring love, please like, comment, and subscribe to Moments of Love. Let us know in the comments below by sharing the line, "Promises outlast the storm," if you felt the warmth of unbreakable bonds. Your engagement keeps these heartfelt stories alive.